Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It's very good to be here back. It's good to have all of you here with us. Happy to have you guys watching us through the internet. So today we're gonna have a lecture about immortality with Marco Magalhaes. But before that, Mateus will do our initial reading, and Luciana our prayer.
I'm going to read Happy Life by Giovanni Franco and Joanna Giangelis. You are not a distant observer of life. You are a member of the universal organism invested with tasks and responsibilities. Carrying them out will lead to many successes for you. The position of a detached observer leads to erroneous viewpoints and conclusions. On the other hand, conscious participation gives the correct measure and provides a better understanding of the data at hand. Consider yourself a valuable person in the web of creation who is becoming more and more active in the Father's work and making it better known and respected. You are God's heir, and the universe, in a way, belongs to you.
Good morning, all. Let's all close our eyes. Let's take this moment to be thankful for being here, present once again. Let's elevate our thoughts, open our heart and mind, and be fully present at this moment to fully absorb today's teachings. Let's involve Marcos with love, so he may be inspired by our spiritual friends to conduct the lecture today. And so be it.
Okay, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking about Easter, which is coming relatively soon, a few weeks still. But primarily, I'm going to be talking about Easter in the context of immortality and a message of immortality that it brings to us. So I'm going to go a little bit in history and talk a little bit about the historical context behind the celebrations that we have today and we still celebrate it. And I'll try to bring you a new understanding, a new concept of looking at Easter in different ways, in a more in-depth analysis of the concept of Easter in general, right? So we'll go through that. First, now, you guys will probably agree with me that we are surrounded by symbolisms, right? So in humanity in general, if you think about all of us and all traditions and all religions, we have been trained really well to use particular symbols to represent things. And this is primarily done because words sometimes, vocabulary, like words are not perfectly representative of certain ideas, right? Or certain concepts that are very abstract. I'll give you an example. It's like if you go back many thousands of years ago, where you wanted to define an idea, for example, an idea that's very abstract. For example, an entity that you cannot see or touch or feel, but it's above us, like a deity or like a goddess or something like that. So how can you possibly describe that entity if most of the words we're using at that time are primarily related to physical things? Like you'll describe a chair or describe this. So that's where, a lot of the conceptualization of images of goddesses and deities has started to appear. So something magical, right? Something that could fly, right? Basically that image represents to us the incredible superpowers associated with those entities, right? And so forth and so on. So, if you think about even the... if you wanna, for example, tell people that we go through cycles of renewal and we can be reborn, why don't you use a phoenix that's born again, right, from fire? So that is a perfect image to show us that, wait a minute, things can actually be reborn and renewed, and is a cycle in life, right? So there's so many of those examples in literature just to explain to us the symbolisms of religion. And Easter or Passah, or Passover, or Pesach, depending on which tradition you're coming from or which country you live. You can call it different names. But it's also embodied in a lot of those symbolisms. And we'll still celebrate those today. And I'll try to separate things from what's the real concept behind it and the symbolism behind it. Okay? I'll give you more examples of symbolisms associated with our cultures, for example, right? I think everyone heard about the evil eye, for example, some, very common in some Middle Eastern countries, in Europe too. You can have this little 3 circles, like the center is dark, then there's a white circle around, the blue circle around. This is called the evil eye that protects us against evil spirits, right? So that's a very common tradition. That's one of the examples of what we called anthropoidic, so it's an anthropaic magic or traditions where we used to derive symbols that would protect us from things that we don't even know what they are, right? See how abstract it is. So I can't find words to describe that, so I come up with a symbol, right, that would be representative of that protection, right? So there were wands and evil eyes and crossed fingers and amulets. Pretty much all of us have seen some pendants and things that we hang on bracelets that are supposed to be charms, right, that are protective. So those are all come from thousands and thousands of year culture where we always believe that there's something above us. Things are good, things are bad. Those are easy concepts to follow. But in the end, when it comes down to us, like how can we protect ourselves? How can we understand things? We created images to represent it, right? So in Easter, that's what we're talking about today. We have lots of images, right? And what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the word Easter? Very first thing. Perfect, a bunny. So we're very well trained and versed in symbolisms, right? See how interesting symbolisms are, because they eventually will take away the message. So the message is started in a very different way, but because of the symbolism and the use of symbolism to represent things, we got connected to symbolism because they're much easier to follow, right? So our brains are trained on that. I'll give you another example. So you're doing your job and you're working on a computer, let's say, okay? And you have a calculator on your desk, and you have a computer with the Excel spreadsheet. Which one do you prefer to use in general? You calculate a formula in Excel, or you're going to try to figure out how to use one of those complex calculators? Excel. Well, you're probably going to try to use Excel and copy and paste things and move things around, right? Edit. Because we're trained to do this, right? So whoever works in Excel, it's easy, right? You just do it. It's like something that takes half a second. So you can find a million examples of that, okay? So if you want to write a sentence that have 14 words, or you can do a drawing that just says a hand that says like this, stop, right? Which one would you use? Like you use the stop sign with a hand or something that can translate them. So symbolisms are exactly the same thing, right? So that's exactly why when you think about Easter, the bunny will come always first, okay? Because it kind of represents the idea. But what's the idea it's representing? So when you think, okay, so the next question is, okay, so you think about Easter, bunny comes up. Which is actually, by history, is actually a hare, is actually not a bunny, but we'll get to that. So a bunny comes up. So what's the idea to you? Don't think too much about history now. Just think, what is that bunny representing to you? Have you thought about that? Anyone? Chocolate. Good. Excellent. We're moving here. So when you think about bunny, the next idea will be a chocolate, right? Something, related to something sweet, Have you done the exercise of thinking about a bunny and extrapolating the idea of a bunny to represent what it really was in the beginning, why we talk about a bunny? We don't do it, right? Because the concepts, eventually they start to fade away, right? And then we're substituted by imagery. And imagery is very easy to abuse, right? Because then, if I want to sell my products, the easiest way, and everyone in marketing here will agree with me, I hope, is that the easiest way that I can sell a product is to have a brand, and this brand has to be connected with a good idea that is easy to remember and bring something good to you, right? Isn't Bunny cute? super, right? So if you sell chocolates and you want to sell tons of chocolates in the Easter, what do? So you promote your chocolate in the Easter bunny chocolate, and because it's Easter, it's bunny, it's beautiful, it's chocolates. So, that same idea is being misused and used in many different ways. So in a way, now we mostly remember the imagery, not the concept. A lot of other interesting things in history too. We'll get to the bunny later on, but we'll talk about it later. But if you think about history, let's go back in time now. Let's go to the back of the time where, Jesus was celebrating Passover. Remember Jesus? Remember? Okay. So you guys all remember Jesus now. Okay, so we're not talking about bunnies anymore. So we all remember Jesus, and we remember that Jesus Christian? No. Yes or no? Well, he couldn't be Christian because Christianism as an entity started like 300 years after he died or discarnated, right? So he was actually Jewish, right? So he celebrated Jewish traditions, right? So what was the tradition that was happening the time of his death, basically, as an incarnated entity, was the Passover, right? If you guys remember Passover, the Exodus, that's what actually the Passover really represents, occurred about 1,300 years before Christ, right? And after 400 years of slavery, Jews were able to flee Egypt back into their lands, which is the promised lands, right? Where they constituted their first temple, then the second temple, and that history goes on, right? So when Moses led the way, through the Passover to the new land, that obviously is one of the key historical aspects of Jewish culture, right? And therefore, Jesus Christ was celebrating that moment with everyone. So that is the Last Supper. Remember the Last Supper? That's exactly what he was celebrating, right? So what did people used to do at the time? Used to have dinner as a family, as a group together, right? Did they eat bunnies? No. So again, those concepts that we celebrate today are so deviating from the original concepts. But he was celebrating it. And if you guys remember a little bit of history, just to show you a lot about imagery too, I like that. So at that same time, remember the 10 plagues of Egypt? I guess you can remember a little bit of that. So just summarize. In a way to expedite the process of Exodus. So in other words, to force Egyptian kings at the time to allow Jews to return to their lands, God will promote this 10 plagues that would make a lot of suffer. Obviously, we're talking about a very strange concept for us now because we understand that God would never force someone to suffer. Anyways, this is history, okay? And then the 10th, the last plague with the firstborn son would actually be, all of them will be killed, right? Will die. And in order to prevent that, Moses got a tip from God, say, well, in order to promote this, it's very easy to do. So the Lord says, what you have to do is to paint your doors with blood. The blood has to come from, remember that the animal, right? The sheep that was being sacrificed. So the sheep was born and raised and fed nicely for about a week. And then it's in the Bible, Nissan, we'll talk about it later. But, and then, it will be sacrificed, and the blood of that sacrificed animal will be painted on the doors. So the evil spirit coming in to take the life of the eldest son would actually pass over, or jump over the house that had the blood painted on the doors, right? So that's another concept of the Passa, which is another tradition that's embodied into the same concepts, right? So those are all imageries and concepts that were happening at the time. So why do we hang things on our door to protect us? Have you thought about how many houses there are little charms and things on the doors? That's where that tradition arose, right? So many thousands of years ago. And that's why we still do the same thing, right? So that because of the plagues of Egypt. So it's just to give another historical concept, right? Now, obviously now, if, after Jesus celebrated the Passover, and, we know the story, and he was obviously judged, right, by the precept, by the king at the time, by the high priests, and all of them eventually led to the punishment. The punishment was to be crucified to death, and that's exactly what happened, and we know the story. But then 3 days later, what happened? Do you guys remember? Yes. What happened then? Like, did he actually come back? This body come back from decomposition? No. So what happened? Do you guys know? What is the resuscitation or resurrection in that case? Any ideas? No? Okay. All right. So this is probably one of the topics with the most debate ever in humanity. In Spiritism, we know pretty much a lot of the concepts that help us understand what happened, right? As we know, spirits, particularly highly elevated spirits, can manipulate the universal cosmic fluid that surrounds all of us with the help of other incarnated spirits too, can modify the properties of the universal cosmic fluid to give it shape, matter, give it color, give it density, gives texture, temperature. In other words, objects can be created, bodies can be created, right? Actually, the body was not there. It's just that the universal cosmic fluid or the fluids around were manipulated, obviously, by higher spirits, including in that case the highest spirits we've ever seen on earth, Jesus, to actually recreate, to the human eyes, a physical body. So he could manifest as a physical body. Was that necessary at the time? Obviously, yes, right? So can you imagine at that time if Jesus just like transmitted some thoughts through the minds of the apostles? Do you think they were going to believe it? They'll say, yeah, sure, Jesus is here talking to me. Oh, 100%, right? No, so he definitely needed to present himself with a touchable body because he knew the apostles were actually, even seeing him, would challenge him, right? So that's totally possible, right? A body that's been exposed to a few days of decomposition on the sun, crucified, the matter is already gone. Like, it's in decomposition. That body, why would you break a physical natural law just to bring a body back, just to prove the point that you can survive? Jesus would never do that, right? Just think about it. Why Jesus would bend natural laws of God just to prove the point to us that, he can come back? See, Jesus is Jesus. Like, it's not us. Maybe we think about it, right? We'll say, yeah, sure, we'll do everything we can, kind of thing. But Jesus doesn't need to do that. So he actually manipulated fluidic energy to recreate a body and manifest himself. And we can read that in the Medium's book. We can look at mediums of physical effects. So you can see how even us as mediums can actually recreate objects. For example, Jesus can recreate anything he wants. He has literally the highest ability of manipulate anything around him, right? By using his thoughts. Anyway, so that's what happened. So he resurrected, okay? And since then, after about 200 years after all this happened, the church at that time, the nascent Christian church, decided to create a day to celebrate that, okay? And that's what we celebrate as Easter, okay? Or Pasqua, or depending on where you are, right? So now, is it the exact date that was happened? Obviously not, right? Calendars change so many times. Even historians cannot figure out exactly if Jesus was born in the year 0 or -6 or +6. It's completely irrelevant, right? But the church wanted to, at that time, to separate Passover from Easter, because obviously they didn't want to live on the same celebration as the Jews. So that's why we're now doing that the full moon after the spring solstice, right? So that's what we do, and that's why it changes from somewhere in March to somewhere in April, right? So it really changes after that. So it could be up to 4 weeks of differences, because we follow at that time the lunar calendar. So now this is the history, right? So that's what we're celebrating as Christians as the word Easter. Okay? Now, what about Easter eggs and bunnies and things? Okay, so the Easter egg is probably one of the oldest traditions that we incorporated. It's roughly about, historians think about 60,000 years old. And that has nothing to do with Easter in the beginning, right? So the idea is, obviously many countries, particularly European tradition, some Asian countries too, would used to paint eggs, right? And the idea behind painting the eggs obviously manifest the cycle of life. It's the utmost representative of a enclosed new existence, basically, that will shine and will grow, right? So it represents fertility, represents life, it represents cycles of life, right? So it was incorporated many thousands of years ago into our culture, and that's why also incorporated into celebration of Easter. The bunnies, or originally the hares, again, there's a lot of possibilities here. If, depending on where you're reading, some will think that it's a particular Nordic goddess that was used to be represented by a hare. Others will think about other things, but in general, it represents fertility, right? So that's the connecting points between them. Okay, so we're representing fertility. We're representing a new cycle of life, and that's kind of fits well with the idea of Easter, and that's why we, in general, put them all together in a mixer. We blend it for about 30 seconds, and whatever comes out of it, with the chocolate on it, it's Easter. Okay? So that's a big summary of Easter. Okay? And obviously the chocolate's all over the place. Now, so what we do now, so that's Easter now. So what we do is, like, we need to buy the biggest Easter egg, chocolate egg ever in the universe, because if we don't do that, then all of a sudden, it's not good enough, right? It's not really Easter. If I give a little chocolate egg, is that okay? Maybe, maybe I buy a tiny one just to my colleagues in work, and I'll buy a medium one for the parents, for the families members that I don't see much, and I buy this 5-kilogram egg, to a very special person, right? That's how I set, right, Marcio? So that's how I separate, I rank order, people according to the size of my chocolate eggs. Okay, just a fun fact. Do you know why the chocolate bunnies are actually hollow in the center? Do you know that? Has nothing to do with Easter. Have you ever thought about eating a rock solid 2-inch piece of chocolate? You probably break your teeth, right? So that's probably why. It makes it easier to carry around. So there you go. But this is completely a side story here. But again, so we come to a point that Easter itself, the original concept of it has completely disappeared in almost every sense, except when you go to church on Sunday, right? That you kind of remember, this is where, Jesus, came back again. Or if you go to your Jewish celebrations and say, well, this is the Passover, and so forth and so on. But in general, we're going back into this very typical mode that we are in a society today. We try to compensate things and demonstrate things by physical matter. So we have to buy things, right? So that's the typical thing that occurs in Christmas time too, right? Although we've been trying hard to change that concept, it's still the same. What does that speak to? So look back at our families, our relationships, right? And what we do and what we don't do. When time comes that I have a celebration, we always try to emphasize things and try to compensate mistakes, right? Try to kind of make people feel better because maybe we're not doing the right things. So what we do, we keep buying stuff, right? We keep complementing love with a piece of chocolate. Right? And that's a very problematic concept, right? Particularly because it prevents you from looking inside you, right? Because you're delivering something physical in a way that you're trying to show affection and love based on that little piece of chocolate, right? Which, by the way, has nothing to do with anything that we're celebrating, right? It's just, okay, I love chocolate, but that's okay, right? It has nothing to do with Easter, okay? Another thing that comes in place now, see, now there's this deviation of the rule that we created, but also in other traditions, not necessarily for us in Spiritism, that we certainly understand that really death, as we celebrate in this case, and resurrection, they don't exist, right? We're always alive. We're always alive as a spirit, and we're just going through cycles of existence, and we'll talk about it. But for many others do not share that same concept. Easter comes after a period of this punishment, guilt, and suffering, autoflagellation because of the imagery. Remember the imageries that we talked about in the beginning? The imagery of Christ crucified and suffering. Was he suffering? No. So why do we suffer? Have you think about it? Have you thought about it? So that imagery translates into, remember we talked about the imagery of the bunny, right? So the imagery of the crucifixion, but then obviously the resurrection, is the dichotomy of our existences, okay? So in one end of it, it's us autoflagellating ourselves because we can't do things, because we're not good enough, because we can't do this, because I can't achieve that, because this is not good enough, because God doesn't like me, because why things are so difficult for me, why Raquel gets everything and I don't have anything, why is, Carlos' lawn so much nicer than my lawn? That's unbelievable. I cannot believe. God, what's wrong with you? Right? So that cycle embodies this self-punishment, guilty, complaining mode that comes with this imagery that we build up over thousands of times. And we can't let it go of it. Okay? It's exactly the same imagery of a kid that wants to jump off the stair and you say no, and they'll throw a fit. Right? You want to jump out of the stair and you say, you cannot do that. You're going to break your neck. Right? But for the kid, literally, is the kid thinking about anything other than actually jumping? No. So that's exactly who we are in terms of moral evolution understanding of the laws of God. Right? Unfortunately. We're getting there. Okay? So there's two concepts. And the other concept, so one is this relatively negative imagery that we create. And now comes the compensatory imagery, which represents the resurrection. Right? Which the resurrection is the idea that, well, we can make it. Oh, we can do it. See, even, Jesus beat death, right? So if that can possibly happen, then I can thrive myself. I can try myself as hard as I can to, to do more, right? So that's the compensatory mechanism there. The problem with that is that, obviously, if we set our bar too high on the achievements that we have on this side, and we cannot make it, we'll jump right back into the other mode, which is the complaining, punishment, guilty mode, right? And that's difficult because we're always going to be pending towards complaining rather than actually being happy because of whatever we have, right? Because we always find it's a very difficult balance. And those imageries that we create from the history that we're celebrating now are basically representing that as to us. Right? And that's what Easter is doing. Okay? So what are we going to do? Okay? So now, since we now talk too much about history and everything, so let's go back to our daily lives. So what are we going to do? So what Spiritism tells us that may help us change that cycle? Okay? First of all is to respect every tradition. Right? I paint eggs with my son. Is that a problem? I'm Spiritist. That's okay, right? Can I eat chocolate? Yeah, I can. Right? I do a lot, actually. Joyce knows that, too. So she's listening now. She's probably, yeah, I know that. The problem is not the symbolism. Eating chocolate is not a problem. Well, maybe if you have a sugar-free diet is a problem. But it's not necessarily a problem. The problem is that what comes from that imagery in our action. So how we translate what's happening to what we do and the actions that we take, right? So For example, one of the main concepts behind Easter, in a Spiritist perspective, is the idea of freedom, right? And you're probably saying, freedom? Oh, freedom because you're escaping from the egg. No, we're not talking about the egg now. Is when you see the concept of resurrection that Jesus showed to us, right? So in other words, he's actually the image of looking at him and say, well, yeah, that's that. Death does not exist. He's here, right? Death does not exist. So if you look at it in a shallow perspective, right? So Grace is thinking about her biomaterials now, looking at deeper and surface interaction. So if you look at the very surface of your material or your story, what you're looking is primarily this. So, oh yeah, he's alive again because he's Jesus, right? You know, you can do that, right? That's a very shallow interpretation. But what is the deeper meaning that he wanted to tell everyone and us? Is that the resurrection has to be from every one of us, from the old you that lives inside of you. Let's resurrect that and transform it into a new person. So it is a process of freeing yourself from the old you, right? That is the cycle that Easter's telling you, okay? So who is the old you? It's pretty much you, right? Us, okay? Have we killed someone before? I did. Have we did a lot of horrible things before? I raised both hands. Have we done atrocious things ever? Yes, tons of times. That's who we are. We've been through cycles and cycles of existences doing a lot of mistakes. A ton of mistakes. So the fact that we are here thinking about it is a big kudos. Okay? Good job. Right? Good job. Look at us. We can actually be here thinking about who we are. Isn't that amazing? How many times we've done this before? Very few. I can tell you, probably count in one hand or two maybe, right? So that is proving to you that resurrection, as Jesus told you, exists. Because you can look inside of you and bring within you a new person to life. You can do this. So that touches on a concept which is also very important in Spiritism, which is also called inner transformation. That's probably an overused word, but it's a very important concept. Okay? Because inner transformation is a process. It's not a done deal on a day. And everyone thinks it the wrong way. Right? So we are in the process of inner transformation for hundreds and thousands of years. And we'll still have a long road to go. I'm not going to do my inner transformation after my breakfast today, and I'll be such a nice person in the afternoon. Because if I think I can do that, I can guarantee you the next day I'm going to hit myself against a wall, and I'm going to be proved to myself again that, oh, I cannot do this. And then all of a sudden, I'm going back to my imagery of suffering, complaining, guilt, right? I can't do this. And we go there very often because we've been trained to do that, right? That's part of who we are. We've been exposed to this so many times, of the idea of sin. So you sinned against God, right? So you got to suffer, right? We've been trained to do that. So it's very difficult to disconnect that from who we are today. Okay? So that is part of inner transformation. It's like look inside of you right now and thinking, well, here's who I am, right? I've done a lot in the past. Great, I don't remember it. Thank you, God. Okay? Because if I did, then yeah, sure, I wouldn't be here today. I can guarantee you that. Okay? So thank you for that. And also now, independently of what I've done in the past, people can get some ideas sometimes when they're sleeping. They have kind of brief memory, vague ideas of maybe what they happened before. But in general, we don't remember anything. Independently of what happened, let's take it from here. What can I do next? So doing the exercise we're doing right now, just going through this concept and just thinking about it, is a very good start. Why don't you do it every day? A lot of people did that before. We're going to talk about one, St. Augustine. Right? I'll talk about him in a minute. Okay? So one concept is freedom. The other concept is immortality. This one is a little bit more, this is easier to follow. Right? Because by proving the point that death, as we understand the end of our existences, did not exist. So we are still exactly the same, either if I have this nice pair of clothing we call body, or if we don't have it, I'm still exactly the same person, because I am pretty much what I think. Right? And also, the third concept is forgiveness. Because we don't have to look at Easter just at that little brief timing period where Jesus appeared to walk out of the place where his body was resting and talk to Mary Magdalene and talk to... It's not that period that's the most important. It's the whole concept around it, right? Jesus, right before all that happening, before he's being judged and crucified, obviously he knew that, right? He was really well prepared for that. But what he said to all of them was pretty much like, you know, love one another as I have loved you. That is exactly what he said when we're celebrating the Passover, right? That's exactly what it was saying. And even Paul afterward in his letters, he would even write something very similar where say, you know, forgiving others is the best way you can show someone that you are better. Right? Because that's what Jesus was trying to tell us all the way along. Right? How can you actually improve himself? And he knew already that many of them would deny him, betray him, would leave him. They knew it. Was he saying, get out of here, I don't want to talk to you because tomorrow you're going to exchange my location because of 5 coins and, you know, just because you want to start a revolution and I don't like that idea. He never, what did he say? Come here, eat with me, right? Let's celebrate love. That's what we're doing. So Easter, as a prominent message behind this, is always celebrating love, family, friends, right? Getting together. And many traditions today, primarily the only celebration they have on Easter is a dinner. They have dinner together as a family, right? Such a great idea. Okay? I can guarantee you that very, very soon there will be an introduction of idea of gifts into Easter too. And that's a typical thing that's been happening in history, right? Started with some painted eggs, and then chocolate eggs, and then big chocolate eggs, and then bunnies, and then big bunnies, and then little cards, and then cards turns into gifts, and gifts turns into other things. And all of a sudden, very, very soon, what we're going to be doing in Easter is exchanging gifts. That's I can guarantee that's going to happen. Maybe not in 5 years, 10 years, but it will be a tradition. We'll incorporate that. And what Jesus wanted us to exchange in Easter? Remember the Last Supper. What was he doing? What was he giving? What did he say when he gave the gift and what he was trying to tell them? What was he giving to them? A part of himself. Not a physical one, right? So, of course, different traditions will interpret things in different ways, but the concept that he was saying is that this is me. And what is Jesus? Perfect. So what is he telling us to do? Share what? Share who you are, and you gotta share love. You gotta share, you know, everything that's good to others. So you can demonstrate, as Paul is going to say, you can demonstrate that you can be better. Okay? We're not better by saying that we're better. And that happens quite often, right? Facebook. You guys, do you know Facebook? Instagram now. Sorry, I'm getting old. I have to. Not even Instagram. What's now? Snapchat. I don't even know what that is. But that's a great thing. So we hide our ego into multiple layers, right? So we hide our ego into this super alter ego, and then this little shallow surface around us, which shows the universe who you not are. Not who you are, but who you're not, most of the time, right? This is something we created to survive, because if everyone knew exactly who we were in the middle of us, like who we are really, probably most of you wouldn't be my friends. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe yes. Maybe no. But this is really part of who we are. We have a very difficult time judging people. We do this. Do we judge people? Okay, I got confused there. So obviously we don't do any of that. We don't judge. We don't look at the cover of the book and tell what's going to happen, and we don't do any of that. So what I'm saying here is completely relevant to you guys. Okay. So what I'm going to say primarily is that because we don't do any of that, so it doesn't matter. We can show our egos to everyone, right? And that will be all fine. Okay. Do you think life in society would be easy if we actually knew the inner intentions and thoughts of everyone? Or would it be harder? For some people, it would be great, right? So for Mother Teresa, she would probably be all fine because, you can see her thoughts by her actions. Oh, that reminds me of something. What was Jesus doing again? Remember, we talk about Jesus all the time. What was the main concept that Jesus taught us? The main concept. Love, for sure, because he actually the representation of love. But what did he talk about himself? Did anywhere in the Bible you see Jesus saying, I am going to do this? What did he do? He actually did it. If you look at the shallow surface again, you see, well, she's adulterer, she did this, and then from adultery, it kind of scales because, we're in a very male-dominant society. We are? No. Okay, so sorry, I'm just creating concepts here. So we're in a very incredibly male-dominant society, and then, imagine that time. We still are, right? So we're starting from adultery, and then all of a sudden she's a prostitute, and then she's like the evilest person ever to live in planet Earth, right? And probably what she did, nothing, right? She probably did nothing. But because of the type of society they lived in, any hint that someone was doing something wrong with the husband or anything like that, it was like you're gonna be stoned, right? Okay, perfect. So Jesus, he was not lecturing the guys, say, hey guys, like, listen, we gotta love one another, here's what I'm gonna tell you to do. No. He went in there and said, do you have anything against? So he acted. He always did what he wanted to teach us. So many people do that too. Like you see a lot of the spirits coming on earth and try to help us out, right? And that is the disconnect that we still have on Easter, Jesus' message, and who we are, right? Is actually enacting who we really are and then doing it and putting into practice what we think about sometimes, okay? And I'm going to finish now in the last few minutes because I mentioned his name here. And I think it's a very, very interesting story for all of us. St. Augustine of Hippo. I think it's one of the... obviously, he contributes incredibly to Spiritism and Spirit's book. There's so many answers that are directly from him. And there are quotes from him in the Gospel according to Spiritism. In the media, but everywhere, pretty much in the entire codification of Spiritism, you see many participations of St. Augustine. And a little bit of history. So he is a member of a North African group that's called the Berbers that used to live in North Africa. And he was a very affluent family. He had education. He was able to speak Latin very well, so not the local dialect, so it's a very influential society. But in his in a book he wrote called Confessions, he writes, and this is about 300, 400 years after Jesus. He writes about a lot of things he's done when he was young and teenager. And I can tell he didn't do a lot of good things that time, right? And he, for example, he tells a passage where he steals a piece of bread, I think, and when going to steal the piece of bread, he goes through what he's thinking at the moment. And he tells us that, well, I was not taking that bread because I was hungry. It's because I could do it, right? So I'm going to change that concept a little bit and said, you know, I'm driving over the speed limit on 401, not because I have to be a TSS at 10, because actually I'll make it if I drive it at 50, but I can do it, right? I can pass cars, right? Well, I'm not going to rush and push everyone to get to the head of line just because, you know, if I don't, I can do it. Right? That concept is ingrained in our minds deeply. And St. Augustine thinks about it. He's able to separate in his own mind, why is he doing things? How does he do it? Every night, he goes into his self-reflection mode. What did I do today? Can we do that? As an easy exercise that can help fix a lot of things. Family relationships, work relationships, career goals planning, family planning, all sorts of things. We can always think about what are we doing, why are we doing, and how can we do it better. Not 10 years from now, tomorrow. So if you do it every night, you can set up goals that you can do. I did that for a few weeks. No, I lost track now. But I did it. I'm still trying to do it, and it's not as easy as it sounds, but I'm trying to do that. And I remember one of the very first things that I decided to do when I kind of did my little internal reflection thing is that I said, you know what? I'm going to say hi and good morning to the guy that stands in the door of my work at that time. I was in New York when I was first starting doing this. And because I always had the feeling that no one talks to this poor guy. Because we always rush in and out. His desk is a gigantic building, so his desk was like 20 feet back from the door. And everyone's kind of rushing around like we typically do. We don't care about lots of stuff when we're walking, right? So I did that. From that day on, we always chatted in the morning. I would come in, he would give me this big smile, he would walk out of his desk, would chat about life, and I kept going. I did it. I did it. How did I do it? Because I thought about it. If you don't think about it, and you don't set up goals that you can achieve, disaster will come, right? If I'm here at night and I say, well, you know, what I'm going to do tomorrow, I'm going to donate all my fortune of a few line of credits. So I'm gonna donate all and my mortgage. No, so just life in Canada. So I'm gonna donate all the fortune that I don't have to all this charity work, and I'm gonna leave my job and I'm gonna go to Africa, like my friends here just came from, and I'm gonna be. This is my life now. Is it gonna happen? No. What's going to happen then? Because it's not going to happen. I know that, right? I'm set up to fail. And when I fail, I'm going to be happy or sad? Do I have the drive now to do other things? No. So where am I going? I'm going backwards, right? And then what's going to happen afterwards? I'm going to get depressed because I can't do things, right? And I came to see how can I actually do things. Then life's not good anymore. So now I can't relate to people well because I'm a failure, right? And then you start the cycle again. And that's a difficult cycle to escape because when you get you don't see the outside, and then all of a sudden you're tunneled into this very negative path. Okay? So in the age of 31. Marcia, you're already over a few years. Yeah, a little bit. I'm still almost there. I'm almost there. So at the age of 31, he was converted to Christianism. Okay? But he did not take Christianism as most of the people at that time used to take. It's like, say, yeah, sure, I'll just do it, and whatever, I'll just follow this book, and I'll do this, and I'm not going to think about anything else. He actually decided to create ideas with the resources that he had, and he became one of the most prolific writers and philosophers within Christianity, and we'll still quote him today. Okay? So one of the, just to finish now, I'm going to read one of the passages from the Spirit's book in the question 919. He's going to say this. So at the end of each day, I examined my conscience, reviewed what I had done, and asked myself whether or not I had failed to fulfill some duty and whether or not anyone had reason to complain about me. Right? This part, I had to stop for a few days because I was going to get depressed. Then I restarted because I've realized how many things I was doing to get, to allow people to get upset with me. And that idea, that thought of being upset with you, what does it generate? It's physical. Thoughts are matter. So it really affects us, right? What is the best way to turn that around to be? Well, throw the most positive energies back to that person, right? So you can counteract that negativity, okay? So think about this. It was thus that I arrived at knowing myself and seeing what there was in me that needed to be reformed, not in others. Oh, I hate that guy. Fine, right? What can I do? Okay? Those who every night would recall all their actions during the day and would ask themselves what good or evil, maybe not, we can change those words a little bit, what good, positive or negative things we've done. Like evil is a very loaded word, but what positive and negative things that I've done would acquire great strength for self-improvement. Examine what you may have done against God, then against your neighbor, and lastly, against yourselves. Right? The answers will be either repose of your conscience, which I am far away from getting to that level, because I'm actually the opposite. I find so many things that I've done wrong, or this or that, to myself, to others, that I probably going to be another hour just rethinking about that. But, in his case, he could get some repose to conscience, because he'll probably say, well, yeah, I did a lot of good things, right? Or an indication of a wrong that you must amend. So it's not you could, not you should, that you must amend. Self-knowledge is therefore the key to individual improvement. And this, my friend, is the core of the Easter message. The core of the Easter message is freedom from the old you, forgiveness, and self-improvement or inner transformation. That is a new cycle. So the Easter is the utmost representation of a new chance, a new possibility, a new pathway. Right? That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. I hope I'm the good friends.
Yes.
I'm gonna get a big chocolate.
Yeah, we got.
Dark one, okay?
We'll talk about it. We'll talk about
Dark, right?
Yes.
All right. So we do have time for a few questions. If anyone have any question or comment, anyone in the internet, we have Marco Magalhaes at in the back can read your question for us.
Okay. Too much.
Anyone?
I'm gonna start doing it now.
No? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, good question. Yeah. Yes, can I still have the chocolate eggs? Of course, I absolutely love chocolate. And again, like I said, symbolism will always exist. We cannot get rid of it, right? Being the symbolism, not now at least, we may eventually do, but, because symbolism is pretty much everywhere. Like, you know, being a gold status on a credit card to having gold star membership on the Starbucks rewards card. It's like, you know, having this or that, or, you know, using a particular brand because it looks cool, or, you know, or buying gigantic bunnies for Easter. The symbolisms that we're like immersed in it, and as long as we do so, the idea is that you don't have to be the outlier of everything, but you have to take in the real message and act on it. It doesn't matter if you eat chocolate or not. That's really, really relevant. Okay, so that's the idea.
Anyone else?
So let's do the other way.
Yeah.
We celebrate Easter every day. We eat chocolate.
Like that. Yes. So let's celebrate Easter every day. Sure, I'm up for it. I'll give you one.
I have a comment about the
Yes.
exercise. It's
Yes.
something that I learned here with Julio. I think Julio.
Julio, yes.
Yeah, he came here and he spoke about little things that we can do, and something that
Correct,
I learned, and
yes.
usually I do. I try
Yeah.
when I like remember, and sometimes just don't.
Yes.
It's just when I go to the store or something,
Yeah.
I call the person, the cashier, by their names,
Yes.
and it really changes. Sometimes
Absolutely.
they look sad, but whenever you go, hi, how are you?
Yeah.
You know, and call them by the name, you just smile and start that chat.
Yeah.
And it really, I think it's good for me. Sometimes I'm in a hurry too.
Yeah.
I'm sad,
Absolutely.
whatever. Whenever you start that conversation, like small conversation, and I see them smile, it's a good exercise
Absolutely.
to call
Yeah.
them by their names.
Yeah.
And not just pass by.
Yeah, that's a great. There's so many little things you can do. And I remember around the time that I was trying to implement that as a routine, also I was exposed to some scenarios just to kind of go through. You know, I'm thinking about, you know, I remember my old times when I was in high school, and I have this like term test coming in, you know, and you know, you prepare yourself for some time, and then you do a little term test in the end, just to make sure that you're doing well. So I remember I had an encounter with individuals in the train and in the bus one day that really demanded me, like, a lot of my ability to forgive and to understand and to share. And the first one I failed badly. Literally, I walked out, said, you know, I don't want to talk to you, kind of thing. And then a week after, another one came. So God gave me that another opportunity. And then I said, okay, now I got to do something. And then I did it, and I'm so happy that I did it. And I ended up helping the person, and I helped, obviously, so there's so many of those opportunities, like little things you can do, little things. Well, you know, we're doing now even with Daniel now, every time we go to the movie theater, have you guys ever looked at the floor after the movie's over?
Yeah.
Great. So, see, there's a lot of things we can do, right? So just pick up stuff, and there's the list is endless, and start with tiny things. That's a good example.
Yeah, there are two questions here from Johanna Ruiz. First one is, can you recommend any readings from the Gospel according to Spiritism or another source that talks about Jesus' path and his upbringing? That's the first one.
Okay.
The second one is, what can we get from the Last Supper in terms of giving a part of us to people in our daily lives?
Very quickly before you answer,
Yes.
let me repeat the question
Yes.
for people in the internet can hear. No, the first question was about what books or what passages in the gospel we can learn more about. I forgot about what Jesus is bringing. And the second question, I already forgot.
The Last Supper. So the
Oh
question
yeah,
is-
what we can learn in our daily lives about the Last Supper.
Okay. So first, those are great comments and questions. So first one, unfortunately, I'll have to say the entire gospel is the answer, because I probably cannot tell you which particular part of the gospel will give you more or less information, because in the end, the entire gospel is integrally connected and talks about facets of some type of knowledge that we're building, basically, right? So what I would really recommend is to study it in a consistent way, and that's, you know, you can read a page a day, 2 pages a day, or think about it and reflect or talk to people about it. Just get into the mode of doing it, and you'll see very, very soon, in a few months, you'll read the entire thing and you get a lot of information from it. So Gospel according to Spiritism is probably, that's how I would study. And we have, for those who are here, we have the study group here that can help with that too. Now, for the second question, is like for the Last Supper. So the Last Supper is one of the most amazing lessons, and I think there's an entire lecture we can do about that. But just to summarize very, very quickly. So in the Last Supper, what Jesus, first of all, he brings everyone together to the table, and he sits together with them as one of them, not above, not below, he just sits as one of them. He shares knowledge, he shares the food, and he, in the end, to complement all that, or after forgiving everyone ahead of time, he's already forgiving people ahead of time, right? Because he knew what was going to happen. He eventually, in the end, will share what he calls part of himself, which is in the end representing to us, is sharing the true representation of love to all of us, right? Now, you can argue that, well, we're not perfect, right? So what are we going to share? Listen, we can always help those who need. There's always people that can be helped around us, and we are always available to help. Or, we're sharing love in that case. It could be as simple as praying for 2 seconds and just closing your eyes and say, God, help this person. Or obviously, if you have the tools of doing something more intricate, go ahead and do it. But there's always a way of help, of sharing that good vibration. Okay? So just think about it. There's many ways of doing it.
And one more thing that came to my mind, well, Jackie gave you her example and what you said about, the time that you start talking to the guy and nobody. In fact, I think the most affected people is our own selves when we start doing that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so my question to you is, how did you feel doing that?
It is transformational. I can tell you that. It made my day so much nicer until something happened at work, and then I forgot everything. Just kidding. No, it's just, it really transformation. So, you get to think about the situations. Like every time you get a smile back from someone, which is like the true manifestation of that, the real smile, right? That's just like a smirk. But it's just really, you can feel that energy right back at you. There's nothing more amazing than that. Just to make someone happy and being helpful. In the end, I agree, Marcio. So that will eventually, that you're helping yourself, in a way that really it's bringing a lot of these good vibrations back to you. So, yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you, everyone. We're going to close the transmission for the internet. So I invite you guys who are watching us to do your own final prayer there. For you guys who's here, we're going to get prepared for the passes. Okay.